It's a real pleasure and a privilege to be part of this conversation. I've had the rather unusual experience of living both alongside the book and alongside its author here at STIAS for the past 5 months, and have so grown and expanded my own understanding through this engagement. The thing that's so powerful for me about this book is, there are multiple things, but one of them is, as Tsitsi has just said, the investment in storytelling and in writing, and in the sense that the literary imagination is the site for the assertion of dignity in the face of objectification and of dehumanization, and how the literary imagination can function really as a form of resistance to the sort of cataclysmic dehumanization that history bequeaths us in this part of the world in its very, very particular ways. And it's this engagement with the particular that I think is so extraordinary about what literature can do. And here I suppose I want to focus for a minute on the most inconsequential word in the title, this mournable body. Not any mournable body, but this one. And I think that especially at the moment that we're living in, where we are drowning in statistics and data in relation to the pandemic, etc., the idea that this body, a particular body, a life, this life, any life is mournable, is grievable, is memorable. That is what I think is so powerful. This is not the life of a famous person, of a hero. It's a life, as Tsitsi has told us, which is framed by subsequent and consequent and consequential failures. And yet, in this life, as it is told and as it is recorded, is extraordinary power and strength from which we all learn and through which we are humbled. So the title of the book, Tsitsi herself says in her acknowledgements that it was prompted by her reading an article by T.J. Cole in which he talked about unmournable bodies, those bodies that don't matter ostensibly, those bodies that are not made to matter. And we can think about it in that epic sense. And we can think about it also in relation to the concept that Judith Butler has evolved, the grievable body, which bodies are attributed with the dignity in death, which makes them marked, which makes them named, which makes them worthy of record. And Tsitsi refuses the sense that any one body is more grievable or mournable than another by taking this body seriously. And I think that in the face of the kind of, the inequality, the poverty, the ongoing harm that's done to human life, and the lack of dignity in which so many of our fellow South Africans and the people on this continent live, this is a really, really important intervention. All lives are mournable, all lives matter. And fiction is one of the forms through which that can be so beautifully and clearly articulated. And it is a matter of storytelling, but it's not only a matter of storytelling, it's also a matter of crafting the story in a very, very particular way and in a very, very powerful way. So I want to sort of foreground the fact that the way in which the story of this life is crafted helps us to bear the journey of her failure and to come out at the end of it after she has faced her huge dilemma and her huge choice. And the other thing that I suppose is very powerful that fiction can do, and where I think it's so important, and this goes to Professor de Villiers' advocacy for the arts right at the beginning, is that fiction can take us beyond the binaries, beyond the polarities, beyond simplistic notions of victims and perpetrators, of the guilty and the innocent, beyond cutouts and stereotypes and caricatures that often circulate in our popular discourses, and particularly in forms of political advocacy, to the sense of the complexity of what it is to live a life, what it is to live a life in history, imbricated by history, a life that is totally constructed and informed by systems of power, by historical processes, by forms of harm that actually frame the way that a life is lived, but do not reduce it to some cipher, to some, one-dimensional position in relation to those historical sources. And one of the things that's so extremely powerful is the way in which the complexity of this writable body is produced for us. It's a mournable body, but it's also a writable body. It's a body that is constructed through the process of writing against anonymity, against oblivion, against erasure. It brings into 3 dimensions what it is to live a life under duress and what it is to be human from whatever little you might originate in the face of the concerted efforts to dehumanize. And as my fellow panelists have so beautifully articulated, the processes, the historical processes of colonialism, of racism, of objectification, of dehumanization strive to differentiate some human beings from others, some peoples from others, some persons from others, but that what this kind of attention to the detail of a particular life, of this life does, is to resist that kind of demarcation and that kind of stratification. So I think that that's really, really powerful, and it's what I take away from the book. But the other thing I take away, and this is also to do with the craft of writing in the mournable body, is the choice that Tsitsi makes to write in the second person. And at first, Tsitsi, it took me a while to get this. I don't know how other people have found this in reading it, but the whole book is articulated as an internal dialogue that Tambuzai has with herself. We see the struggle of a complex, split subject at the heart of this book, who is not an integrated subject. She is a fragmented subject from the start, as are we all. Her fragmentation, her split, her doubt, her anxiety, her constant sense of her own shame and her betrayal of herself is there in every sentence that she utters, and it's absolutely part of the narration. And this double consciousness, we've all, read theoretically of what it is to live with double consciousness, to what it is to understand one's position from multiple perspectives, and how black subjects in particular live out double consciousness. It goes back to Du Bois, Sylvia Wynter, and other writers that I'm sure many people will be familiar with. But to write a novel that makes that voice feel genuine, feel authentic, and feel that it can teach us something about the complexity of human ambivalence and alienation is an extraordinary achievement, and one which I've now read the book twice and listened to it once on my audiobook, so I have that voice in my head all the time. So this sense of what it is to be split, what it is to be fragmented, and yet to have a human voice is I think, so powerful. And alienation, therefore, I think is right at the heart of this human subject that Tambuzai comes to embody for us. She's alienated from herself, she's alienated from her past, she's alienated from her aspirations, she's alienated from the projections that society places on her. She wants material rewards in order to protect her from her pain, but these, of course, are fallacious, and these are illusory. She's filled with aspiration. She wants to affirm herself against the dehumanization that surrounds her. She wants to integrate the body into one mind, into one being, beyond the wounds of history and the wounds of past war and violence, into an integrated self. But this is not to be. She becomes ill, in a sense, in the book, literally, mentally ill. She has to recover. She has to find herself. She loses herself. We don't know in the end what it is. She finds we think she finds a resolution, but we don't know if she does, because at the heart of herself, and this is profoundly relevant to Pumla's initial question about what it is to be a woman in the face of these issues, the relationship with the mother is absolutely foundational to her sense of betrayal and shame. She has to leave the mother in order to become the person she thinks she wants to be, the emancipated, urban, cosmopolitan, educated, successful woman. And there are successive acts of betrayal throughout the book, which mean that she has to really repress the relationship, the love, the umbilical attachment to the mother. She has to refuse the mother's gift. She has to deny the love and affection. She has to try to seal up her pain and her wound in order to survive. But in the end, with her ultimate betrayal, that defeats her. There is no escape from the mother. And I wonder whether this is an allegory. I wonder whether this is an individual story, or whether we can think about it in an extended sense as a kind of allegory for something bigger. So is there any hope of repair at the end of this novel? I don't know. I genuinely don't know. And I look forward to the conversation to see what you will say. I think the hope for me lies in the beautiful craftedness of this book. That, as you say, Tsitsi, there is a voice. You have a voice. We have a voice. There is the voice of art, of literature, of song, of storytelling, of making meaning. And in that is a hope. But the story that is told by that voice is one that has to face up to the historical wounds and the tyranny and the pain of the past. It has to navigate the burden that it bears. And so it tells of that historical wound. And I can only say that in that voice is a kind of facing up. What is it to face up to be in the face of, to confront the past, to recognize the past, to ask for recognition, to live with its impossibility, to remember the past, to confront it, to face up to it. There is no escape from it. It lives in the blood and in the body, a body that is mournable and in mourning, a body that is in history. So I think that what I take from this book is that a mournable body is a body that has lived and carries past life within it. It's etched into its character, on its skin, in its voice. And this is what the book demonstrates for me. Thank you.